Hey there, everyone. Eric Bland here for the Anything But Bland weekly update. Happy Friday. It's a beautiful sunny summer day here in Lexington, South Carolina. Hot as blue blazes. Last night I was in Greenville, watched one of my favorite bands, Old Crow Medicine Band. They had a lot of new players, but just 2 hours of mayhem. I've seen them in Columbia. I've seen them in Greenville. I've seen them in Nashville. I think they're better in a smaller venue with the crowd being a lot younger, so that people could stand up and dance and everything. It was a little subdued until the end, but they're just an amazing band that uh, brings the ruckus. Incredibly talented. Each guy plays like three or four different instruments. The consistency is Ketchum, the lead singer. We went to a restaurant called Camp. Food was great. Downtown Greenville is just amazing. I haven't been there in a while. Uh, it's definitely a foodie town. It was really safe. A lot of people walking around late at night. Thursday night was popping. Wish Columbia could do something like that. We saw Frank Epps, my attorney friend, big giant, teddy bear of a man. Went with Big Danny and his wife Cindy. They're our besties. So, but let's start talking about this week because so much happened, both politically and on a social level. A lot of things with celebrities. We had some things in our state. We had something that happened this morning. Dick Harpootlian told Fox News that he believes that there's definitely going to be a retrial and a reversal of Alex Murdaugh's conviction. If not done on the state level, it'll be when they get to the federal level. Evidently, he said that there were newly discovered text messages between Alex Murdaugh and his cousin Eddie. You remember cousin Eddie, who was involved in the roadside shooting on Labor Day, where Alex purportedly was shot somebody when he was trying to change his tire. Those charges against cousin Eddie are still out there, and those charges against Alex are still out there. But Dick Harpootlian said he would like to have known those text messages, and then they would make a decision on, during the trial whether they were going to use them or call cousin Eddie as a witness. The problem is, I think that Fitz News had those text messages, and I think they're going to say that Dick Harpootlian had them as well, and he strategically chose not to use them and not to call cousin Eddie during the trial. The other news that could be relevant is now he said that there's a second juror, not just the egg lady juror, but a second juror, a second seating juror, who also now regrets her vote and believes that she or he was pressured by the jury. That'll be interesting to see how that all unfolds. This morning there was some news about President Trump and his swollen ankles and discolorations that he has on his hands. His ankles are very swollen. That is called chronic venous insufficiency. Tends to happen in older individuals sometimes when I fly or if I wear too tight of ankle high socks. My legs can get swollen. Didn't happen when I was before 60 years old. It's common. Um, doesn't happen to me frequently. It looked pretty extreme for President Trump. Some people say it may be a sign of diabetes, but I'm sure that he'll take some Lasix or something and start wearing compression socks so that he doesn't have it. Happens a lot when you're on your feet, so I don't think it's something that the public really should be too concerned about. But what is really interesting is the whole Epstein matter. And Epstein is, everybody knows he's the guy that, had a private island and everybody would fly on his plane and he would have parties and bring young underage women. Those are children. Okay. When we want to talk about underage girls, we're talking about children. Let's just not sugarcoat it. And there would be these wild sex parties, and his assistant Gazelle was doing like 20 years. And the big issue, this has been a MAGA issue for a long time. After the birthright issue of President Obama in 2012, Trump and the MAGA and the QAnon people focused on that the Democrats had a ring of prostitution for pedophilia for underage girls, and it supposedly came about in the pizza shop in Georgetown, Washington, D.C. That's never proven. But the Epstein stuff is real. He ended up getting 2 years or some kind of ridiculous sentence in 2008 when he was in Florida uh, for sex trafficking and having sex with minors. He's a financier, but nobody knows how he really made his money. And for a long time, the QAnon and the MAGA people believed that there were a lot of high people in government who um, had relationships with Epstein and used his services to get young girls, a lot of Hollywood people, a lot of famous people. Obviously, Donald Trump's name has been bandied about um, back and forth. There's about 20 different photographs of him with Epstein and Gazelle, and there are soirees and functions in New York City. To my knowledge, there's nothing that would link him to Epstein. There's a birthday card supposedly that came out yesterday on the news, and Trump now is going to sue the Wall Street Journal and Rupert Murdoch because it's supposedly a card to Epstein where he wished him a happy birthday and said something um, sexual in nature and drew a picture or something about women's breasts or something like that. And Trump doesn't do that, from what we know. And it was typewritten. He does handwritten writing notes, so that's a seems to be something that may not be true. But what is true is the MAGA people are very concerned that people like Kash Patel and Dan Burjani and Trump are ran to expose the Epstein thing because there's many people who believe that uh, on that list are very important people. We already know that Prince Andrew uh, paid a lot of money to somebody who ended up committing suicide, God forbid, in England, that he had sex with, and she was underage at the time, purportedly. We know that Bill Gates had gone to the island, and Bill Clinton had flown on his plane. So there's a lot of smoke there, and I think there's Democrats and Republicans both who want the Epstein files released for different reasons, but they do want them released. And President Trump does not want them released. He tried to convince his people this week to not release the files. The House of Representatives voted not to release the files, including Nancy Mace. And I tweeted about that this morning. It's really rich, quite hypocritical that she has spent the last 6 months promoting the fact that she had been sexually abused, which is horrible, and that there were other people who have been sexually abused. And she's been highly critical of the Attorney General of South Carolina, as well as local law enforcement and local prosecutors for not bringing cases involving sex trafficking. But yet, when it came time for her vote to release all the Epstein files, she chose to vote against that. So, if you're going to walk the walk, you got to talk the talk, you got to walk the walk. And doesn't seem like she's doing that. As to President Trump, he was getting high heat on this. He got very antagonistic towards his supporters. He called them stupid, Republicans, losers. He said to them, I don't want your support anymore, which is insane. But he is not running for reelection. And I think the MAGA supporters, are starting to see that some of the things that he may have campaigned on, he's not following through. A lot he is on, immigration, tariffs, and everything like that. But he was not going to get us into forever wars, and he seems to be going against that. And there are a lot of MAGA people that are upset by the bombing of Iran, which I agreed on, and the fact that he's not really stamping down Israel, who is just paying back all their enemies. And we'll talk about the bombing of Syria and some churches that they were done. So Trump, who's feeling the heat, who maligned his supporters and thought this would go away and told everybody it's a nothing burger, now is encouraging Pam Bondi, who's the Attorney General, to petition the court to release grand jury transcripts from the Epstein matter. And there's a difference between grand jury transcripts and the documents that support the testimony that was grand jury testimony. Trump has not said he wants those documents released, and the concern amongst MAGA people and Democratic people is Trump's on the list. That he has had, parties with Epstein or whatever, and maybe he was gone to the island years and years ago. I don't know. Um, but clearly he's pretty defensive about it. And, Kash Patel and Dan Bongino signed a memo saying that there is no client list, and that he did commit suicide, even though there's a minute and 20 minutes that have been either erased or not accounted for of tape during the suicide. Um, they have maintained, the government now, that it was suicide. And that's funny because these people have made their living on sowing conspiracy theories. So the MAGA people and the QAnon people are looking at it as, hey, you convinced us to put you in office, and you were going to clean house and out all these deep state people and dark money and darkness that seems to pervade wealthy people with their own Migliari or whatever they want to call it, private gang of rich people, billionaires club. So we'll see how this plays out. NPR and PBS were defunded this week. I used to love listening to Garrison Keller on NPR radio. He was from Minnesota, Minnetonka, or whatever. Click and Clack. I think our country needs cultural arts that is provided by PBS, and I think this is a bad thing that has been done. I don't think it's significant dollars when you look at all the money that all the benefits that I think the society gets from having NPR and PBS, but we shall see where that goes. It looks like that Air India flight that crashed last month may have been done by a pilot who was mentally disturbed and turned the fuel off to the engines. And it's at a switch that you really can't hit. I mean, if you're trying to just, let's say, a radio or a knob or whatever, that fuel switch is like underneath. You got to really have an intention to get to it to turn it off. And by the time they realized it was off and the other pilots turned it back on, there wasn't enough thrust in the jet crash. So that is very, very sad. Syria, that the United States has supported, put some troops on the south of their border, and Israel launched missiles at them. And that really got President Trump upset, because it's, they're an Arab minority country, but they're trying to get beyond Bashar Assad, and Trump is having diplomatic relations with the new governing body of Syria. So Israel bombed them. United States is upset. These are Druze in Syria. Israel's also bombing church in Gaza, which is a real problem. And they killed, I think, 3 Catholics there. And they also bombed in the West Bank, not in Gaza, but in West Bank. And they killed an American Christian there. And so what we're seeing is this is not, I don't think it's a war about theology where it's Israel versus the Muslims or Christian. I just think it's more of an ethnicity war, but Israel may be going too far. And I think it's time for President Trump, and I'm a Zionist and happy with a lot of what Israel's done. I'm not happy with Netanyahu as a person. I think he's doing this so that he will not be prosecuted. The prosecution will not continue. As you know, there's been a corruption trial involving him and his son and his wife that has been ongoing for 2 years, but it's paused during this last 2 years. It's been going on for 3 years. It's paused during the last 2 years after October 7th. He's not really a great guy. I think he's corrupt. And I do think that he's prolonging these kind of small theater battles so that the prosecution doesn't recommence. They also cut for Medicaid $10 billion for these very expensive and complex wound bandages when there are burns on people's bodies. That has been a cut under the new big beautiful bill. There was an article in the state paper where Cooperative Health, which is um, it's a health organization that provides medical services through clinics throughout the state of South Carolina in rural areas, and they get Medicaid, a lot of Medicaid, and they're going to be combining a lot of offices and cutting staff. They're cutting 80 staff members. This is a direct result of the big beautiful bill. There are hospitals that we're going to talk about that are shutting down in New York, in rural areas. And again, rural areas have poor people. They don't have just pure poor minority people. They have poor white people who have been supporters of Donald Trump and many Republicans. And I think this is going to be something that is going to, again, have long term repercussions. This week, a Bush appointed judge, George Bush II, who was president from 2000 to 2008, he blocked the birthright citizenship. Remember, a couple weeks ago, the Supreme Court um, reversed a lower court judge who put a countrywide injunction in place against the administration uh, deporting people and saying that they were not citizens simply because they were born here. Well, now they've certified a national class action case, which seems to be the way around what the Supreme Court ruled. And so a federal judge did certify that. And right now there is an injunction in place in that case. Trump threatened a 35% tariff on Canadian goods this week, and he may double what most nations are being charged. He seems to have a lot of animosity towards Canada. I don't know why. It's causing investors to be jittery, but the stock market's at an all-time high. So not sure what the market is saying about that. Obviously, he changes by the hour. He's now extended the 90-day tariff moratorium to now being to September 1st for a lot of different countries. He is doing something good in offering a new visa program for farm and hotel workers. You know, we do need labor in the hotel industry and in the tourism industry, and certainly in the farming industry where there seems to be a lot of illegal immigrants. So Trump is going to offer a new visa program. The big thing is that he is sending Patriot missiles to Ukraine, and to be used as defensively. Now, this is going to take about 6 months to get there, and he's kind of doing it through the proxy, the way Biden did that, where you sell these weapons to Germany and other NATO countries, and then they provide them to Ukraine. It's transparent. Russia knows that the United States are doing this. Trump seems to be having enough of the BS that he's getting from President Putin. He said, we have nice talks, and then we hang up the phone and he bombs and kills people at night. And Trump is finally, I think, realizing that Putin is playing him and that Putin is not willing to stop this war, that it's not going to stop. There's not going to be peace anytime soon. Remember, that was a war that he said he would solve in 24 hours after becoming president. It's just really hard to do that. Dan Bongino, who is the second in command at the FBI, didn't show up for work last Friday. Supposedly he's still in his position, but he was a very popular podcaster and part of the conspiracy movement. I don't think he's too pleased with what's going on with the Epstein matter. Really applaud New York. Governor Hochul really put a lot of her political capital on the line. And New York is going to be one of, I think, several states now that will ban cell phones from the opening bell to the closing bell of school. That you have to either put them, I think, in your locker, or that you turn them in to the guards when you come through. And so kids will have to learn again. They're going to have to learn to talk to each other and communicate properly, not get their information from TikTok, but go to the actual library like we used to do and look up books through the card catalogs and read magazines and actually listen and pay attention in school. I think it's an unbelievably good thing that every state should do. Um, some of these kids were getting 250 messages a day to look at TikTok videos and Instagram and Facebook. So I think it's just an amazing, amazing thing. Um, all the State Department, CIA, and FBI cuts are finally starting to take effect, and other countries are taking notice. And I heard this week that they're not sharing the same level and volume of intelligence and diplomacy being done with the United States because they don't trust our government. And that's a bad thing. If we don't have cooperation on terrorism and other sharing of intelligence, that's really a bad thing. Um, you're starting to see the MAGA movement turning a little bit against Donald Trump. We talked about the Epstein matter, um, but what you're seeing is Megyn Kelly, Joe Rogan, and Charlie Kirk, who have monster followings on their podcasts and shows. They're starting to say, what is the cover up here? Why is Donald Trump, the vessel that we put into government, not doing this? There's so many different documents in the federal government regarding Epstein. It's not just um, these prosecution documents that they've recovered from him, but the FAA has all the flight logs, which would indicate who had been on the plane and who boarded these planes and who disembarked and went through customs. The Department of Treasury has tons of banking transactions where Epstein was sent money by a lot of different people. So that's a big thing that I think isn't going to die. David Gergen, who worked for every president, I think from Nixon on forward to Obama, died this week at 83 years old. And he actually wrote the statement, the most famous statement that Reagan wrote. One is, I think this isn't the one he wrote, but I love this one that Reagan sent when he was running against, I think it was Dukakis, not Dukakis, it was, who was it in 84? Mondale. He said, I'm not going to hold your youth and inexperience against you, because they were trying to say that Reagan was too old. Thought it was great. But the actual quote that that David Gergen gave him, and every president has used it since, is, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? And that's an amazing thing to say because, he said that to Jimmy Carter in 1980. But then when he ran against Mondale, Mondale used it against him because Reagan was president in 1980 and running again in 84. But it didn't hurt Reagan. He trounced Mondale, won 49 out of 50 states. The State Department has begun laying off over 1,300 staff people. Here's a great thing, which President Trump convinced Coca-Cola to do this week. When you go to Mexico or you go to Europe, the Coca-Cola products are made out of cane sugar, natural cane sugar. In the United States, the Coca-Cola is made out of high fructose, which is really bad for you. And so he has convinced Coca-Cola to release Coca-Cola in the United States with cane sugar. And everybody knows that Trump loves Coca-Cola, I think Diet Coke or whatever. I think that's a great thing. And I applaud President Trump for doing that. The Supreme Court has allowed Donald Trump to now proceed with mass firing at the educational department. Again, it's just the Supreme Court, again, signing these orders, not providing any reasoning, but appearing to let Donald Trump just emasculate these departments, eviscerate them. And these are congressionally approved departments with congressionally approved budgets. So that's an interesting thing. Nancy Mace called the critics of the big, beautiful bill un-American, even though there's 63% of the public who is against the big, beautiful bill. I don't think you're un-American if you criticize a bill that cuts PBS, NPR, foreign aid, U.S. aid, aid to Africa for AIDS, or it cuts rural hospitals. I don't think that makes me un-American when I can criticize that bill. And I just find Nancy Mace to be offensive. I find her to be um, vacuous. I don't think she stands for anything anymore. I think it's whatever the finger goes up in the wind. When she ran for office, she seemed to be somebody that was a trailblazer that bucked her own party. Um, but she now seems to be somebody that has changed, and Washington has changed her. FEMA, which is interesting, didn't answer thousands of calls from flood survivors in Texas, and the documents show this. This isn't just Kristi Noem who said, "Look, anything over $100,000, I got to sign for before we'll approve it," which caused a 3-day delay for a lot of FEMA aid. This is just the rank and file people who have to answer the telephone because people are entitled to $750 in a state of emergency from FEMA to get started to rebuild their lives. So many different administrative people were fired that the phone banks weren't working. 2 days after the floods, the agency struggled to answer calls from survivors because the call contracts centers were not extended, the contracts for the call centers. 5 rural hospitals in New York City, in New York State, are closing. There's not a nation in this, not a state in our nation that can backfill all the cuts that came with this new federal bill. So when these rural hospitals are closing, or these rural medical practices like Cooperative Health in South Carolina, there's no amount of money that can backfill this by a state. State needs federal money. What's interesting is Josh Hawley, who's the senator from Missouri, a big conservative right-wing guy, voted enthusiastically for the big, beautiful bill. 2 weeks later, guess what he's doing? He's voting to roll back the Medicaid cuts because he's heard from the constituents in his state, again, rural white voters who are Republican voting for Donald Trump, rural white voters who are MAGA voters. They are seeing that they are losing their health care. There's hospitals that are closing in Missouri and medical clinics. Also, in flash flood hotspots, many federal meteorologist positions remain unfilled. This isn't just in Texas. This is along the Mississippi River where flooding happens. This is in New Orleans where a lot of flooding happens with the levees. This was very disheartening for me. This week, the Democrats took a poll, and the Democrats say that their 3 best candidates for 2028 are Vice President Harris, Governor Gavin Newsom in California, and Pete Buttigieg. Pete Buttigieg is, I think, one of the smartest Democrats out there. He is gay. He's married. I just don't think our country is ready yet for a gay male president, possibly a gay female president, but not a gay male president, because I think on the world stage, there's still, by a lot of these third world countries or some of these Muslim countries, are not accepting of the gay lifestyle. And Pete Buttigieg is somebody that I think is so smart on policy, so practical, and has great answers, served in the military. But I just don't think our country is ready for that. I think our country is ready for a woman president, but it's certainly not going to be Harris. I think she had her time. She is stained by being Biden's vice president. She is not. I just don't think she's respected. I think between the caricature of how they painted her with her laugh, and they seem to say that she doesn't have the chops or smarts. We got to put up better candidates. It's got to be a Josh Shapiro. It's got to be an Andy Bashar from Kentucky, Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, or a Mark Cuban, somebody new, somebody younger, somebody that hasn't been out there. Um, AOC called Trump a rapist. He got $15 million from George Stephanopoulos when he called him a rapist. So I'm all for Donald Trump suing AOC. He's a sexual predator. He's a sexual batterer, but he was not held liable for being a rapist. The British Open, or the Open Championship, is going on right now at Royal Portrush. I played that course with Big Danny. It's a great course. Um, I think you're seeing new names up on the leaderboard that we don't recognize. Obviously, Scotty Scheffler's still there. Ricky Fowler, who's never won a major, is up there. But we're not seeing the big names. And I think it's because the Live Golf Tour has hurt a lot of the big superstars that have gone over there. They're not as competitive. They're playing in shorts. It's 3-day tournament. It's a staggered start. They have music. It's easy. Everybody makes the cut. So that's what's interesting. I woke up this morning and the Colbert Late Show was canceled. And he's from Charleston, and his ratings were amazing, but CBS is trying to get a merger with another company. They paid off Trump for the 60 Minutes, supposedly cutting out tape from the Vice President Harris interview. And to lose Colbert, I think, is to lose a significant comedic, serious voice on nightly TV. The baseball All-Star game was interesting this week. The home run derby, Cal Raleigh won the All-Star game, the home run derby. He's a catcher for the Seattle Mariners. I think he has 36 or 37 home runs, the most by a catcher through halfway through the season in baseball history. A great young hitter. I think the highlight of that was O'Neal Cruz from Pittsburgh hitting a 513-foot home run, which is one of the longest home runs ever hit in Major League Baseball. Aaron Judge has been the fastest baseball player to reach 350 home runs. He did it, I think, in a full season before Mark McGwire did it. And he's a once-in-a-lifetime talent. We're seeing Shohei Ohtani. I think Judge and Ohtani, watching them, are two of the best baseball players that we have seen in the last 50 years. And this goes against Mike Trout, who I think was and is one of the greatest baseball players in the last 50 years. Damian Lillard, who played for the Milwaukee Bucks with Giannis Antetokounmpo, and tore his Achilles tendon this year, is going back to Portland Trailblazers, where he spent his career. He's, I think, had the last 3 seasons here in Milwaukee, or 2 seasons. He signed a 3-year contract for, I think, $42 million, but he's going to miss all next season because he's recuperating from his torn Achilles. So I'm very happy for him. He's a good guy, good player. I like it when players stick with one team like Larry Bird did throughout his career. It's just basketball used to be that way. So I'm happy he's gone home. TJ Watts, I'm a Steelers fan. I'm also an Eagles fan. It's hard to believe, but I grew up liking the Steel Curtain in the 70s. TJ Watts finally signed his contract as the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL. It's a $120 million contract. $108 million is guaranteed. He's going to make, or $123 million. He's going to make $41 million a year. The Dallas Cowboys now have Parsons, and each guy that signs, these rushers with sack leaders, end up getting more money. So it seems like that the Dallas Cowboys make the poorest decisions in the world, Jerry Jones, in waiting to sign their players. They lost it with Dak Prescott, who's making like $70 million a year. They waited too long to re-sign him. They did it with CD Lamb as a wide receiver, and now they're doing it with Parsons. It does seem that Jerry Jones is more concerned with making money from the Cowboys than winning football. So we shall see. Most amazing thing that I've been reading about, I saw it. It's so funny. At a Coldplay concert, somebody snapped a photo or whatever, and somebody came up on the Jumbotron, and it was a AI astronomer CEO, Andy Byron, and his head of HR, Christine Cabot, who now have been outed of having an affair because I think they were being romantic and had their arms around each other, and it was on the jumbotron. And now the world and his family, unfortunately, and his wife, unfortunately, sees that he's been unfaithful. So the old adage, you play with fire, you get burned. Um, this week, again, I talked about the Alex Murdaugh case. Dick Harpootlian said that there is, he thinks, going to be a new trial because there were some text messages with cousin Eddie, and maybe a second juror is trying to change their mind. I spoke the day before, Wednesday, to the South Carolina Paralegals Association, a great group of ladies and men. They were learned. I spoke about my book, Anything But Bland, and I spoke about, the perils of being a paralegal if you work for a dirty lawyer or a lawyer that's not doing what he's supposed to do. And a lawyer is supposed to have 100% fidelity to a client, no self-dealing. You have to put your own interest aside and only advance and be single-minded in the interests of your client. It's the highest duty at law. I work for my clients don't work for me. And so when paralegals see a lawyer doing something that is wrong, or dispersing money in a way that's inconsistent with what should be done, what does that paralegal do? You can't just go attack your boss, because that'll put you in a doghouse, will get you fired. If you go over your boss's head, that could be a problem too. But you actually have a duty to do that. And I told the paralegals that they don't work just for the firm or their lawyer, they work for their clients, and that they have fiduciary duties to the clients. So it's a real, sensitive topic. It's something that is scary. It was really good talking with them. I think I sold almost every book I brought to almost every member that attended. So it was really nice. So now let's get to our audience questions here. We had the Stephen Smith walk last Saturday in Hampton. Renee and I went down where we walked from his cemetery to the site where he was found on Sandy Run Road and back. It was a little like 3.4 miles. We had about 60 people walking with us. 125 people showed up. We have raised over $13,000 from the walk. David Moses and Mandy Matney did a great job putting on the event. The police were amazing with SLED there. Peter Rosinski's the new SLED officer. Hampton County Sheriff was great with some of his deputies. It just was a really good morning. Unfortunately, there's nothing new to report. We have a $50,000 reward for Stephen Smith, and any information that could lead to what happened. It's just incredibly sad that Sandy Smith has lost her child on July 8, 2015, which in and of itself is so difficult to live with if your child predeceases you. But now she lives for the last 10 years without knowing what happened to her child. We've talked about R.J. May a number of times. The audience wants to know. I really think that the guy's going to get convicted, and it's a minimum of 20 years for a lot of these crimes that he's done. We've talked about the tariff, the governor's race. Pam Everett, the current lieutenant governor under Henry McMaster, has entered the race. It is going to be, as someone said here, a clown show between Alan Wilson and Nancy Mace. I think Nancy Mace is going to be a very problematic candidate. I think it's going to be nasty. I think she thinks that the more sarcastic she is, the better people are going to like her. I find her to be a vacuous person, devoid of any core beliefs, but that's just my own personal opinion. Becky Hill's going to have a court appearance on today. We shall hear what happens on that. I already shared about Stephen Smith and the update that we've had. Again, we have a new reinvigorated call again for law enforcement to find out what happened to Stephen. In this day and age of post-crime analysis and technology. It's just inconceivable to me that it's been 10 years and there is no firm explanation of what happened to Stephen and how he died. Um, it's interesting that Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, has now come out, and Trump is very upset at him, and also Charlie Kirk, who has this big Republican MAGA voice, that they've come out and said that the Epstein documents should be released. Um, Next thing, let's see. Oh, lots of questions today. Bengals picked Shamar Stewart as the number 17th pick, and he's refusing to sign his rookie deal, and he's training at Texas A&M. Can he legally push his team for a better contract? The answer is no. I mean, if they want him, they'll pay him, but they can just let him sit, and he's going to end up having to go back in the draft next year, or he may get penalized. He can't return to college. He's already renounced his college, so it's going to be another year or longer before he ultimately has an opportunity to play. There is interesting between the NFLPA and the and collusion, that it seems that the owners colluded to not do fully guaranteed contracts for these players, and then the NFLPA chairman has quit, resigned this week. He's under fire because he went along with this with the NFL in order for them to reach agreements. He could face a lawsuit by the rank and file if he did this. Again, the NFL has an antitrust exception by Congress, and it's always on shaky ground, and this could be a real problem. A U.S. appeals court ruled for the NCAA on eligibility rules, maintaining the divide between college and amateur and pros. Could this open the door to new antitrust or labor claims by the athletes? Yes. But what has to happen is these colleges need to make these players employees, and then they negotiate their contracts with them. So that is going to be something interesting to watch, and they're going, if they do that, then they can have a pay scale with a hard cap on how much teams can spend on their players. A juror in the Karen Reed case admitted that leaking secret grand jury details. A grand jury is secret because you don't want to reveal what it went into to have the indictment returned. And it's a federal crime if you violate grand jury testimony and things like that. Corey Hoover, who is listening, said the one question I have about the list is this: if there were truly damning evidence of Trump's involvement, why wouldn't Harris and Biden have made it public during the campaign? Well, that's the interesting thing, because now Trump is saying that this is a cooked up conspiracy by the Biden and Obama administrations, except it was Trump who prosecuted Epstein. So he's the one who has, he's talking out of both sides of his mouth. He can't blame it on the Democrats and Biden because it was his Justice Department, Bill Barr, who brought second charges against Epstein, where he was killed in the prison in New York City. One would think, Corey says, that releasing this information could have shifted public opinion during the election. It could have, but I'm not sure that was something that they could do or they did. It's just let the public see what is out there. Let's see if there are famous people or people that bought their way out of it. Karen Q says, and this is I respect, and I'm a little indifferent about no cell phones in school. On one, kids will have to learn how to use the library for reading and research like we all did back in our day. But when bad things have happened at schools, it's been footage from kids' cell phones that gave parents the most information that was happening in that school. Law enforcement has benefited from footage from kids. But I also heard something, and so you do raise a great point there, Karen. That is the flip side of that, and that is true. But kids who are often on their cell phones in in when there's a mass shooting in a school, their phones go off or somebody pings them and it could cue the shooter and where kids are. So that'll be interesting. Casey Odell asks, just asked me the thoughts on Mullins McLeod announcing his bid for governor. In all candor, I am friends with Mullins McLeod. Um, we often talk about our legal cases together. I think he's an excellent trial attorney, one of the best in the state. People know his background. He's had some issues for alleged drug use a long time ago. He was, I think, married to Jeff Gordon's, not married, dated Jeff Gordon's ex-wife. Uh, he's a hot-headed guy who's brilliant, smart. Unfortunately, he just had an incident in Charleston where um, he was, I think, arrested for not having a certain amount of clothing on. But Mullins is smart. Okay, he ran for governor before and it didn't work. But this time, I think he's going to talk from a populist movement. He's got some great lines where he always says, I'm going to take somebody to church in a trial. And he talks about that people think from three places in their body, from their head, from their heart, and from their gut, from their belly. And he said, I'm going to talk to people belly to belly. So it'll be interesting to see. Mullins is fearless. So do I think he has a chance as a Democrat? I don't, but I do think he's going to be somebody to be reckoned with, and he will shake up the race. So with that said, weekly update done. I know we covered a lot of ground. EB out. Have a great weekend.